Hello, hello. Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and I wanted to speak about a component of the trait, the highly sensitive trait, that a lot of parents can wonder whether or not it is inherent for highly sensitive children to be irritable. So, when we think about the challenge that you may be having walking on eggshells, worried about your highly sensitive child, just running on fumes, always on like an electric eel, just waiting to zap or get zapped, that can be quite frustrating, let alone exhausting for parenting a highly sensitive child. And I think it's really important to note whether or not that component, that experience for you with your sensitive child is actually part of the trait, or if it is a need that your child has to learn how to get met a different way, or that you need to meet for them in a different way. So what we see for parents when they're trying to make sense of the highly sensitive trait, over the years, what I've learned from helping many families is that a lot of parents will come with the assumption that being irritable is part of being highly sensitive. So let's break this down. Being highly sensitive, you have four components of the trait. You have depth of processing, which, taking a lot of information in from the world and processing that deeply. Brief terms. Next is being easily overstimulated. Next is emotionally reactive or empathetic. That's the third one we're going to talk about today. And then fourth is being sensitive to subtleties. So when we think about emotional reactivity and empathy, more empathetic than typical, non-highly sensitive person, the other 80% of the population, it's super important to notice that those two parts of the trait, they don't cancel each other out, but they do go hand in hand. So when you think about your highly sensitive child who is easily overstimulated, that's the second component of the trait. And then they're emotionally reactive. So they may struggle when they're easily overstimulated. They may struggle taking in information that is overstimulating for them, overwhelming, like not just sensations, right? Touch, smell, hearing, the other ones. we're not covering that right today in terms of all five senses. For the most part, what we're focusing on right now is your interactions with your child, right? So when we help parents eliminate the meltdown cycle, get rid of those daily meltdowns, but not from a place of forcing your child to get with the program, or forcing your child to suck it up, or forcing your child to stop being a highly sensitive person, right? Because that's a personality trait, not a diagnosis and not a flaw. Then you have to honor the fact that they will be easily overstimulated in some circumstances. Now, what we help parents do is help their child get used to that overstimulation enough, so much so that they are no longer easily overstimulated. So the process takes time, but it also is important to notice that you have to do that systematically, because if you're not, if you're just, as we've seen many parents do, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks with that, then your child can get overwhelmed quite frequently with the sensations that they're taking in from the world. So let's talk about your relationship, okay? When you're asking your child to pick up their clothes and they say, all right, or I did it, or or why do you always tell me what to do, or I'm sorry. That emotional reactivity is because they are struggling with surprise. And if your child's struggling with surprise, that doesn't mean that we want you tiptoeing into the room and waiting for the right time, right? What that means is that your child needs to deal with the skill of being overstimulated and needs to learn that skill. So that's a need that they have that they need to learn to meet. And then a skill that you need to learn as a parent is delivering how to ask them to do something in an effective way. But many of you have that skill. So it's important to understand that those two things need to go hand in hand, but it's not the whole picture. Because what we can see often for parents, especially if you're, churning through and literally drinking from the fire hose of information on the internet, a lot of the times that you can have an invalidating experience. learning from the typical parenting coach, because what they might be saying to you is in how to ask the question for your child to follow through on a task, or how to set the expectation up in a systematic way. And what we hear for parents who are exhausted dealing with the daily meltdown cycle is that you've been doing that for years, and you've been tiptoeing around or beating around the bush for years, trying to help your child literally just clean up after themselves. And now they're 8, they're 9, they're 10, they're 13, right? And that's the challenge. So when we think about the difference between raising a young child and helping them start to take ownership and agency over doing some of the chores, and an older child whom you've already established for years that that's the expectation, yet when you ask them, they consistently indicate that they're surprised by the expectation, that is often not a delivery problem from you as a parent, right? The way you ask. Though it can be, so I'm not going to discount it. But what I want to say is often it's your child struggling with dealing with surprise, and your child's struggling not only with that, but also with the fear and frustration of having to move on from whatever it is that they're trying to do in the middle of whatever it is that they're in the middle of. So why is that relevant? Why is that relevant? Why that's relevant is that's what somebody might be telling you, or other coaches might tell you to focus on. Wait for the right time, right? Wait for when you have your child's attention. Put a chart up so that the time is set up by the clock or Alexa or Google Home, whatever your robot is in your house, so that you no longer are the one reminding your child. Create the routine, right? But here's the problem. That allows your child to then defer to something outside themselves to feel motivated. And it also allows you to defer to the routine rather than owning the agency with your child, for them to accept responsibility for their actions. Now, this is important, because without the support system of being able to help your child accept frustration or disappointment, accept change in their expectations for the day, and be able to dissipate the intense emotion that comes with that, they're going to consistently be irritable. But that does not mean that they have to stay that way for the rest of their life, because highly sensitive people are not inherently irritable. Okay? That's really, really crucial to understand, because when we think about crowdsourcing the trait and crowdsourcing whether or not this is true for other people's children who are highly sensitive or not, it's really important that you're not looking at symptoms of the meltdown cycle as inherent to the trait, because what you can do is just chalk it up to being highly sensitive and then not address it, or on the flip side, dislike that and then dislike the trait in general, or that can breed resentment being a parent, because, well, enabling or resentment, right? You can move from just saying, oh, my kid can't handle it, I'll just have to clean up for them for the rest of their life, because they just, are just so irritable, I just don't even want to deal with it. And then obviously, 2-3 days later, a week later, after getting frustrated and tired by that, then you move into resentment, and then you ask them to clean up, or you get frustrated and maybe you yell, right? No judgment here, because if you're fried, you're not using the skills that you have. So that obviously sets you up for a disjointed relationship with your child, and that's not what you want. So that's why you're watching these videos, right? So when we think about breaking down the roots of that irritability, it's super important to understand the difference between helping your child cooperate, because that's what is expected of them, and helping your child follow through on expectations, because they know how to handle their frustration, because they know how to handle their emotions, because they know how to manage surprise or a change in their expectations for themselves, for their day. So that requires more support than just coping skills. That requires a system. You need to be able to break down the intensity of your child's emotions in a way that doesn't invalidate them. It doesn't tell them that they're wrong for feeling big emotions. It doesn't make them weak, or consider it to be a flaw of their personality. But break it down in categories, break it down in small chunks so that your child can feel capable of managing their emotions on a step by step by step by step way that is much more thorough than any book or podcast will support you in designing, because troubleshooting is where it's at in terms of helping your child shift out of their irritability. So when we think about how we help parents break out of this dynamic, the important component that a lot of parents are missing is the back and forth communication with somebody who knows how to solve the problem. So that's why we help our clients do that. So when we think about the need that you need to be focusing on is in supporting your child in identifying the fact that even though they don't like what's expected of them, that doesn't mean that they can't do it or that they shouldn't do it. But obviously, if you're delivering that in a way that says, tough luck, kid, get it done, or you're going to lose privileges, your child feels like their back's up against the wall. And what happens? They respond like their back's up against the wall. Me against you, right? And so you're stuck in the same cycle of rage and shame and frustration and aggravation. And both of you are feeling those feelings. Both of you or if there's multiple parents in the house, all three of you, or even the rest of the family is feeling that irritability. So when we think about what that's like, I don't just draw on my experience in helping clients do this. I draw on my personal experience. Growing up with a sensitive sister, one of the things that was really difficult for my parents to discern was how to break out of the tiptoeing around expectations and then fear of asking her to do something or holding her accountable to something she said she was going to do. And then when she didn't feel like she could or wasn't able to because her skills weren't there yet, they enabled her. They stayed stuck in that position. They worried about how she could handle it because of her irritability. They backed off, and that skill was never built in her and in their relationship in terms of holding her to the task that they knew that she was capable of doing with different help. And so what we know to be true for highly sensitive adults is that they can have a hairpin trigger if you don't teach them how to build skills in childhood. And so that might mean that they have a hairpin trigger and they verbally explode to their peers or to their bosses or to their loved ones, or they just implode and they have a hairpin trigger and they know that they don't want to disappoint other people, but instead they take that frustration on themselves. I can't believe I even had a reaction to somebody just asking me a simple thing. I can't believe I am bothered by the fact that I need to go grocery shopping because I used my roommate's cheese because right now I have a school project due and I'm stressed about it, right? And so self-invalidation sets in, and highly sensitive young adults can struggle between feeling like they are obliged to solve somebody else's problem immediately or make it up to somebody if they are the one, in my example, said highly sensitive young adult ate the cheese. And with effective advocacy skills or, interpersonal skills, you could say, I know I ate your cheese and I'll go to the grocery store later today. Right now I really need to work on my paper. But a highly sensitive adult without those skills might pick up their work and grumble internally and go to the grocery store and solve that problem immediately because they don't think that they're allowed to feel frustrated or worried or fearful about their other priorities at the same time of not wanting to disappoint a peer. So, right. And what we think about and notice is that, being a college student in my example that I just came up with the top of my head, it's totally normal to borrow your friend's, your roommate's cheese, right? And put it on your grocery list to get later. That's a normal young adult thing to do. And so what we're thinking about and observing is that we don't need your highly sensitive child to then, as an adult, back themselves into a corner of rigid rules, right? I better not ever borrow somebody's cheese because I don't want to have to go get their cheese when I have other priorities, right? So don't back yourself into that corner of assessing the situation for your child and trying to teach them how to avoid negative emotion or negative circumstances in the first place, because that just isn't always possible. Your child needs to be able to tolerate distress, stress, and surprise no matter what, because life happens, right? And so when we think about tolerating the irritability for your child and being able to help them become less irritable, it's super crucial to just start at the beginning. This is not an inherent part of the trait. This is a symptom of the meltdown cycle that you're stuck in, and you need support in getting out of it. So if that's the case and you don't know where to start, or you're not certain how to break out of the cycle, we encourage you to learn more about the highly sensitive trait and discern the big steps that you need to take in order to break down the ineffective side effects of being highly sensitive without skills. All right, did you see what I just said? The ineffective side effects of being highly sensitive without skills, not side effects of being highly sensitive, okay? Because your highly sensitive child is not broken. With that being said, the skills that you need to support them as their parent likely need to be addressed and adjusted if you're in the meltdown cycle. So go ahead and catch my masterclass. I'll post the link below. It's meganthompsoncoaching.com/5 steps. And we will support you in knowing exactly what first steps you need to take in order to break that down. Okay? So let's see if I can get this link up quickly for you. I don't know. We'll see. You can read it here on the screen. Oh, there you go. Okay. So again, meganthompsoncoaching.com/5 steps, and I will put it's on the link above this video to check that out. Make sure that you register for that training and get a clearer picture of what it truly takes to support your highly sensitive child, so that you no longer feel like you're walking on eggshells on a daily basis, because neither you nor your child, it was put on this earth to be miserable. Okay? All right. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.